June Abbott unloads the back of her truck and gets her equipment out. Once she is in her protective suit, the building manager who has hired her leads her up the stairs. She has been called to clean out a room in one of the apartments, which is a total mess. A guy all over the walls. But June doesn't mind because it's just a part of her job as a crime scene cleaner. June covers her eyes and mouth with protective gear and gets to work. She removes the carpeting which has dried stuck all over it. Then she proceeds to wash the wall where the guys. There are holes in that wall with the hair and teeth of stuck in them. June takes out a tooth and examines it closely in the palm of her hand. The building manager startles her as he has been standing behind her, watching. He asks if she is going to keep the tooth. He wants to hold on to it if she is planning to throw it away. FBI agent Ballard reads a headline in the newspaper that reports that the demise of a beloved teacher has sparked a hunt for her assassin. He puts the newspaper away as he clears out his desk. He views the photograph of a man lying lifeless with a bullet piercing his forehead. The poor man in the photograph is Charles Barlow, also known as the Judas assassin. He was shot by one of his victims, Annie Barlow, as she tried to protect herself. He stares at the deceased serial assassin's face for a long time, until he gets a call which brings him to a crime scene. Officer Mayer is overlooking things at the crime scene. He checks Ballard's FBI-issued ID before asking him to wait for a while. Ballard is not used to waiting at crime scenes, so he proposes that Mayer should inform his lieutenant of his arrival. Mayer doesn't give him a direct response, so Ballard calls out to the lieutenant himself. Mayer is put in his place when the lieutenant clears out Ballard's entry and offers him a cup of coffee. She advises Ballard to cover his feet because the crime scene he is about to enter is quite messy. She briefs him on the victim too. She was a 28-year-old woman named Ellie Ford who moved here from Houston 3 years ago. Her cell phone is missing right now, but it's known that she kept her 713 Houston area code. Her body was found by the building manager earlier this morning. As he looks around the apartment, the lieutenant compliments him on the report that was released about him last week, entailing the details of Judas's case. She decided to get his opinion on this case since he was in town. The lieutenant points out the similarities between this case and the lethal crimes committed by Judas. Those mutual details include the wrists and ankles of the victim that were bound by wire, marks and bruising on the body denoting a struggle, and ultimately homicide by decapitation. Everything matches Judas's MO except a couple of things. Ballard decides to see the difference for himself. He calls out Officer Mayer for shadowing them inside instead of watching the front. Ballard takes some photographs of the crime scene when the lieutenant informs him that he can get images from the forensic department. He refuses because he likes to do this himself. Ballard inquires where Ellie's head is, which is the first difference between this case and the previous ones. This assassin most likely took the victim's head with them, but the police are still sweeping the area just in case. Ballard also captures the photograph of the message that the culprit left for him. There is a message that says, "He showed me the way," written in blood on the ceiling of the room where Ellie was assassinated. In the next scene, June draws the comic of a woman whose house was broken into. The woman in her imagination was terrified of the intruder and ran around the house until she met her tragic fate. June's sketching is interrupted when her boyfriend, Officer Mayer, enters their house. He complains about the bad shift he had last night. The last call was a homicide where he got stuck guarding the crime scene. June also has a busy day ahead as she has a job booked today and also has to take her mom to an NA meeting. Mayer starts to make her breakfast while going on about how messy the crime scene was. He calls Ballard a jerk and June points out that it's unusual to bring in the FBI into a case. Mayer explains that he was brought to the crime scene because he was already in the vicinity, working on the deceased serial assassin thing. Yet, he walked in like he owned the place, and June jokes that she can beat him up for Mayer if he wants. Mayer admits that he wasn't told that Ballard would be coming in, which made him look like an idiot. June finds out that they haven't booked a cleaner yet for the crime scene. Mayer agrees to put in a good word for June, and she kisses him in gratitude. He voices his concerns about her overbooking herself. He has noticed that June has been working a lot lately, and that's because she has to take care of her mom. He puts it out there that June's mom is holding her back. Mayer adds that she takes June's time and money, but June shuts him up. She is offended by this statement and leaves for work, without even having the breakfast he made her. Before she walks out, Mayer apologizes and justifies that he only said it in her best interest. She has a real talent for sketching. He doesn't want her to lose the opportunity of having a real career in drawing comics. He brings out a ring that he bought her. As he hands it to her, he clarifies that it's a token of his love for her and nothing more. Seeing the ring made him think of her, so he bought it. June finds the ring really pretty and puts it on her finger, even though it is a little too big. He tells her that he loves her as she steps out of the door, but all he gets is a rushed okay in response. June later picks up her mom, Margaret, from her house to drive her to her NA meeting. Margaret smokes on the way to her meeting, where she recounts how she left June alone in a car when she was just 6. Margaret reports that it wasn't on purpose. Her usual meetings with her dealer were pretty quick, but she lost track of time that day. Her reasoning is that she was high and was tempted to have a shot with her dealer. That's how she forgot about June in the car, even though she didn't mean to. The poor kid stayed alone in the car for multiple hours. When a cop found little June, she claimed that she was only alone for a couple of minutes, which obviously wasn't true. Ballard listens to the whole incident on tape in his office. The lieutenant brings him the birth certificates and hospital records that he asked for. He continues listening to the tape as Margaret narrates that June lied to the cop because she always looks out for her mom. June thinks of the story she was working on this morning as she waits in the car for Margaret to finish her meeting. When she returns, Margaret updates June on how her meeting went. One of her peers relapsed, but everyone saw that coming. June reminds Margaret that she has to buckle herself up in the car before she starts to drive. Margaret notices the ring on June's finger and asks her about it. Margaret is happy to hear that Mayer gave it to her because he seems to be good for her. They both agree on how beautiful the ring is, and Margaret reminds June that she has to go for her test before they go home. June is worried about how long it'll take because she has a job later. But this is for Margaret's probation, so she agrees to take her anyway. However, June requests her mom to inform her of these errands beforehand. That evening, June works on her comic, while Mayer cleans his guns in the lounge. June gets a call from Margaret, but she declines it. Mayer inquires if she got a call from the station about her job yet, and learns that she'll work on it soon. June addresses this morning's fight and appreciates how supportive he is of her. They kiss and Mayer notices the song she's playing in the background. June tells him that she downloaded it today. There's a knock on their door and Mayer answers it. Meanwhile, June reads a text from her mom, which says that she really needs to talk to her. Mayer rolls his eyes when he encounters Ballard standing at his doorstep. Ballard has come here seeking June, who instantly recognizes him as the jerk FBI agent. Ballard states that he wouldn't pay a visit so late if it wasn't so important. He recounts that he and June were acquaintances during their childhood. When asked about the reason for him being here, Ballard replies that he is an FBI profiler. His first case was Judas Assassin. He began that profile 20 years ago, when the trail went cold. But that case is closed now. Yet, he shows her the picture of Ellie Ford, who June instantly identifies from her imaginative story. She's the woman that June has been drawing in her comic story, but she doesn't let it show in front of Ballard. Instead, she claims to have never seen her before and asks her name. Ballard tells June the woman's name, and that she'll be cleaning her crime scene tomorrow. He's quite sure that this is the work of a Judas copycat. He inquires if June has ever been contacted by Annie Barlow. She is the woman who actually claimed Judas's life, but she hasn't been returning any of their calls. She is not a suspect, but he still needs to speak to her. Ballard adds that June might be a target because her mother was one of the women who were victims of Judas. That puts her on the top of the list of the women that the copycat assassin might target. June interrupts him by pointing out that Margaret is very much alive. That's when Ballard reveals that he's talking about her biological mother, who was Jennifer Glick. He found out about this from June's birth certificate and is surprised to see that she didn't already know this. June puts 2 and 2 together and understands why her mom was calling her so much earlier. Ballard must have gone to her house before coming here. Ballard gives June some of Jennifer Glick's personal effects that he no longer needs to keep at the FBI. June is overwhelmed by all this information overload and ends the meeting there and then. She tells Ballard to continue this conversation some other time, and he agrees. June holds on to the photograph he brought over of Ellie and goes to her room before Ballard is escorted out of their house by Mayer. But on his way out, he gets his hands on June's gruesome thriller comics. He starts to doubt June now and talks to Mayer to see if she has a valid alibi. Mayer is very protective of June, but Ballard still gives him his card in case he wants to reach out. After returning from June's house, Ballard spends his time going through the pictures he took at the crime scene earlier. June is alone in her house, viewing Jennifer's stuff for the first time. She flips the pages through Jennifer's Bible before putting it back in her bag. She sees Ellie's picture and keeps it aside. Then she moves on to Jennifer's old photos and smiles warmly, as she can see her semblance in her biological mother. One of the pictures features Charles Barlow with Jennifer, and that changes June's expression very quickly. She sees more pictures of Charles, and the night lamp beside her starts to flicker. She moves its wire, and it goes back to normal. She gets startled when she takes a glance at the wall, as there is a tall and extremely lean shadow of a human-like figure on it. June turns around to see what's causing it, but then it disappears. She moves the head of the night lamp so that its light falls on another wall, but the shadow appears there too. June holds her breath when the shadow moves in a dangling motion. Its head tilts to the other side, and it moves closer to June until it falls downwards, disappearing into thin air. June looks down her bed to see where it went, but there's nothing there. She gets even more scared when the sheets under her start to pull away by themselves, as if someone is dragging them. June jumps off her bed when a head emerges from under the sheets. She steps back from her room, and the door shuts in her face by itself. She witnesses unseen forces causing disturbances throughout her house, and runs downstairs until she is out of the house. Petrified, she stands out on the street with a knife in her hand, trying to convince herself that she must be hallucinating. She goes back inside and cautiously checks the house with the knife still in her hand. She even checks inside a closet space, but finds it empty. June sits down at her desk and pulls out the papers on the Judas assassin. She reads the articles that narrate his story and how he was at large for more than 2 decades. She spends the night doing her own research on him. The next morning, she drives to Margaret's house to confront her about the truth that she's been hiding from her for her whole life. Margaret's reasoning is that Jennifer was her sister, and she wanted to protect June from the fact that her real mother was. June is furious at Margaret for hiding this all along when she had a right to know. She accuses Margaret of keeping up this facade so that she'll have someone to take care of her. She calls Margaret pathetic and demands to know who her father is. Margaret doesn't have an answer, so June leaves her house to go to her job. As soon as she steps inside, she finds Ellie's house strangely familiar. She can even envision the vinyl playing as Ellie tiptoed around the house to dodge the assassin. She snaps out of it when 2 cops enter the house, prompting her to get to work. She gets up on a stool to erase the message left behind on the ceiling by the assassin. That night, Margaret locks her house before going to bed. She turns all the lights off at first, but the darkness creeps her out, so she switches on a light in the kitchen, but it malfunctions a bit. While she tries to fix it, a silhouette resembling Judas walks by in the background. Margaret washes her face in the bathroom when Judas's reflection can be seen in the mirror. It seems as if he is right behind her and is gradually creeping up on her, still on his forehead. By the time Margaret dries her face and opens her eyes, she sees June standing behind her. She has the same in her forehead as Judas and raises a knife at Margaret's head. In the next scene, June wakes up in the bathroom of her house with the same knife in her hand that she just saw in what she thinks was a nightmare. She immediately gets dressed while calling Margaret. She keeps getting sent to voicemail. June hurriedly drives to Margaret's house as swiftly as she can and uses her set of keys to enter. The scene she discovers inside is enough to make her sick to her stomach. The walls are splattered with blood in the same manner that she has cleaned out many times. June finds herself being interrogated by the lieutenant about how she found the body. June shows her the phone call she made while coming here and expresses shock when she realizes that she might be a suspect. Ballard puts her on the spot by mentioning her fight with Margaret yesterday, for which she is asked to give an explanation. June describes that she felt bad about her fight with Margaret this morning, so she came over to apologize. That is when she found the body. Ballard insinuates that June's anger had something to do with Margaret's horrific demise, which agitates her even more. Mayer has already been informed about all this by the time June returns home. She cries in his arms and blames herself for Margaret's death. Mayer comforts her by expressing how much he loves her, and she says it back. When he lies down with her, she initiates kissing, and they get intimate. June is haunted by the sight of a decapitated Margaret during this, and she screams in horror. She falls to a corner of their bedroom, while Mayer is still on the bed. He is confused about what just happened and watches in concern as June regulates her breathing. She hops in the shower, and the images from last night's dream of Judas creeping up on Margaret come back to her. Mayer is asleep in their bed when she comes out of the bathroom. June quietly sneaks into his wallet and uses his ID to find Annie Barlow's information. She leaves Annie a voicemail, explaining how any one of them could be the next target for this copycat Judas assassin. She also brings up her connection to Jennifer Glick and how she met her end at the hands of Judas when June was just a baby. June requests Annie to call her back before ending the message. The visions keep disturbing June even when she's working. Mayer gets suspicious of her when he wakes up and finds that his stuff has been tampered with. She asks him to show her the photographs from his dad's funeral home because she's looking for reference photos for a mortuary. She claims that she needs to keep working to keep her mind occupied. When she falls asleep that night, June catches glimpses of Ellie and Margaret in her dreams. It's as if Judas's ghost watches her sleep and caresses her face affectionately. As she opens her eyes slightly, she is taken aback by a scene. She witnesses a rotting June with a coming at her with a knife. Now that June is alone again in her house, she senses a lot of paranormal activity happening around her. It worsens when she is thrown off from one end of the hall to another by an invisible entity. She's locked in and hears someone calling her name, so she grabs a baseball bat for self-defense. She spends the whole night in this state of. When she wakes up, Mayer is trying to get inside the house she barricaded because of how unsafe she felt. He is alarmed at the state that the house is in, but she doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to face Mayer, so she goes out and has lunch in her car, parked by the railway tracks. She can't shake off the dream she saw prior to Margaret's demise. She goes to her house and reads the same message written on the wall. June retraces Margaret's footsteps and stumbles upon a page stuck inside her bathroom cabinet. She puts it in her pocket right before Ballard catches her. She vaguely declares that she was looking for something, but Ballard grows even more suspicious of her. An in-depth conversation about June's career choice piques Ballard's interest. He knows that she lied about not knowing Ellie. That night, June parks her car outside her house and opens Jennifer's Bible. She knows that the page she just found was torn from this book. June doesn't feel like going to her house, so she spends the night in her car. She's awakened by a call from Annie Barlow, who knows who Jennifer Glick was. June is still on the phone with Annie when she goes inside her house. June proposes the idea that the recent homicides haven't been committed by a copycat. She believes that Judas somehow found a way back. There's a brief pause in their call, due to Mayer coming back home from his job, but he goes to sleep upstairs. June doesn't think he'd believe her, so Annie refers her to someone who might. Annie and June visit Stevie, but aren't able to get all the details from her. Her family wants to shelter her from this, which is why she's also leaving soon, amidst all the chaos. Annie understands this and recommends that June should leave as well, but she knows that whatever this is, it's attached to her, so she must face it head-on. June also believes that Judas is her father, which is why she feels so connected to this case. Mayer observes Annie with June as he leaves for work. Once inside the house, Annie can also feel a presence that wants them to go upstairs. June shows Annie the room she was trapped in because she was led to the closet. It has an attic, where they conduct a seance to contact Margaret and Ellie's spirits. The spirits lead them to the pink room, which Annie decides to pursue alone because June is injured. When Ballard's co-worker, Daniel, finds out about this, he secretly reports her to Ballard, who'll get to their house to arrest her in 2 hours. The song that June downloaded was playing when Ellie passed away, and her player had the 713 area code sticker glued to it. Annie texts these details to June, right before she is suddenly. Meanwhile, June finds her way to an erotic art studio called the Pink Room, where Ellie used to model. But that's a bust, so she comes back home where she hears some noise. But Ballard distracts her by showing up at her doorstep. She leads him in as Mayer calls June, revealing that Ballard is the copycat assassin. He instructs her to stay away from Ballard as he calls the cops. The ring from June's finger drops on the floor, but she remains calm, not disclosing what she's hearing on the call. She sneaks out of the house while Mayer updates her on the call about Annie getting stabbed. She finds an opportunity to hit Ballard's head with a brick while Mayer is on his way. Ballard is tied up when Mayer gets home. He stuffs Ballard's mouth and steps out to get more cops. June senses that something is wrong and notices her ring rattling on the floor. This leads her to find Mayer's box that contains Ellie's photographs. She's wearing the same ring that Mayer gifted June. She quickly calls 911 and keeps the stuff aside. In a startling turn of events, Mayer confesses that he's the copycat assassin. Apparently, Charles speaks to him so that June can carry on his legacy. Mayer dreams of them claiming lives together to please Judah's spirit, but June stabs Mayer instead. After a goose chase, June ends Mayer's life, even though he wanted to propose to her. Ballard survives his wounds, but Annie doesn't. June is freed of all suspicion and finally publishes her comic. Until one day she gets a call from Stevie, who's transmitting a message from Annie. It's all starting again, and she needs to be careful. As Stevie hangs up on her, Judas stands behind June. A new chain of terror is likely